We need to get started. This is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There is a time for public participation during the meeting as indicated in agenda item 3. Laura, would you please call the roll?
Mr. DeGroat?
Here.
Mrs. Iser?
Here.
Mr. Skidmore?
Here.
Mrs. Smith? Here. Mr. Rudd?
Here.
And Mr. Credible?
Here.
So I'll stand together and face the flag and either here beside us or in the back of the room. Join together in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we move to item 3 on our agenda, we have one item that needs to be added to the agenda, specifically Roman numeral 8. We have an executive session to discuss employment and compensation of a public employee. I'm moving that we add an executive session to consider the investigation of charges or complaints against one or more regulated individuals. I believe that is one of the items that by law has to be done in the executive session. Do we have a second? Second. Any discussion? Laura, could you call the roll?
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. DeGroat?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Now's the time, agenda item 3A, for public participation. And I have 2 individuals who have submitted paperwork to participate. If there's anybody else, now would be the time to get that to me. But without hearing any other folks that want to speak, the first person up is Miss Joni Sears.
Thank you. Not all good intentions turn out as intended, but when mistakes are made, they need to be corrected. Early on during the football season, I noticed a black stone monument was placed near the entrance of the home side locker room. Within 15 seconds of reading the inscription, I instantly knew the information engraved was not correct. My Cam was first team All-State in 1997. His name is not listed. There are 3 names listed that were not first team All-State, but second team. And by the way, there are 17 other former Spartan football players that earned second team All-State. I noticed one sitting here behind me, back towards the back. I do not know who initiated this endeavor. Before investing $3,000 of taxpayer money, I would have made sure my information was correct. This is a moot point to some, but not to my Cam. But this cannot be ignored and has to be corrected. Whoever came up with the idea and made the mistake needs to claim it and bear the cost of correcting it.
Mr. Jason Reed.
Yeah, so I just wanted to come and speak about doing what your community wants. Tonight there's going to be a vote, I guess it's towards the back, on some assistant coaches for the Valley View football staff. So in that, last year I spoke to the board a couple times about that situation, so I just wanted to kind of go back over a little bit. We've had an issue here in Valley View with that, with the members of the board listening to what the community wants and being in stride with what the community wants. So I went and I looked just on the Ohio Get On Board website, which is the website for board members, and it says, what does a school board member actually do? And they give a legitimate definition there of what the school board member is actually supposed to do. So this is a paraphrase of the first sentence and then a quote of the second sentence. The school board member acts as a governance team for the school district. That's the paraphrase. And then the quote is, the board member is a positive and responsible liaison between the school district and the community. So a positive and responsible liaison between the school district and the community. And that's the part that when I was looking at it, I knew that I wanted to come and just speak about this and just reiterate it for the community so that we all could get together again and become united over this, because it's deeply troubling to me when I see Matt King being put up after a committee that was public, not private, not hidden, not selected, handpicked, right? A public committee of members of this community that picked Matt King from several very, very qualified individuals as our new head football coach. And then we had board members that abstained and then voted no against that. I mean, I don't personally know Matt King on a personal level, but it's the kind of thing where everyone I've ever talked to, from boys on the football team to people in the community, the teachers of this school, all say, without a doubt, that is a great person right there. So I don't understand why, when the community who picked these people to pick him, then we have problems with that. And that's again why I want to speak tonight, because I know that tonight then Matt now is making decisions about assistant coaches that he wants. And I trust his decisions that he makes with my child when he's coaching him, with both of my children when he's teaching them. And certainly Mr. Skidmore, I know, thinks has the utmost respect for Matt King as well. So what I really wanted to do is tell the new board members, because I think that some of you, I know Coach Skidmore is aware, but some of you may not know that last year when I spoke to the board members, we went and we found out, because this drug on, so we found out what the community wanted. And there was such strong support at these meetings that I actually took the onus to put together a petition on change.org to look at, what does the community really want? So I'll get to that in a minute. I want to talk real quick, though, about Matt is bringing back Coach Henry, Coach Cradleball, and Coach Stidham, and there may be a couple others that I'm unaware of, but I knew of those three for sure. All of those gentlemen have put in untold hours towards this community, helping our children, making them better leaders, better men. And specifically because the petition had mentioned Coach Stidham, I want to speak about that a little bit. So for the new board members who are not aware, my petition last year read, and this is what the people signed if they agreed with that, they read, "We, the undersigned residents of the Valley View Local School District, request that the superintendent and the Board of Education reinstate Bob Skidmore and his staff, including Butch Stidham and Andy Keating, as coaches for varsity football." And there were 996 people that signed that petition in just over 8 days. So I'm pretty sure that that's a pretty good recollection of what the community wants. So that's what I wanted to make sure that the new board members were aware of. And then finally, I'll close just to say this. We saw last year that the Board of Education and the superintendent, you guys have many jobs that you do. Picking football coaches is not one of them. We saw that play out, unfortunately, for the kids this year. What I will say is that Matt King is probably a much better person to pick football coaches. And so just let me give you some numbers on Coach Stidham and what he's done. So the 5 years before he became our defensive coordinator, we had 50 games in those 5 years. There were 3 shutouts, right? So he's the defensive side, so we're talking about how many points the other team scored. 3 shutouts. The 5 years that Mr. Stidham was the defensive coordinator for us, there were 50 games again. We had 12 shutouts, and 25 times that the opponents were held to 7 points or less. So that's 66% of the time our opponents only scored 7 points or got shut out. So between what the community wants and the cold hard facts, because I can tell you that there's no high school around here that wouldn't see that and think that that's impressive and want that person to be on their staff. That's really what I'm here for, to communicate to you guys and let you know. So there's really no question, I don't think, in this vote, but I just wanted to bring this up and reiterate it for the new board members. Thank you.
We have one more.
I sent you a link to see what
Yes, sir. Mr. Tyler Remmer.
Thank you. I plan to use right at 5 minutes. I'm going to read from a one-page regarding the Valley View Building Committee. I thank you for your time and patience. Hi, I'm Mr. Raymer. Welcome back to the Valley View Sandwich Committee. I know it's been over 1.5 years since we last met, with zero communication in between, but no worries. Today, we're going to review some pictures of sandwiches, so let's get started. Here's a couple pictures of sandwiches. One's a big one, one's a different one. They have different costs. I don't know what that cost is. I want you guys to see that sandwich, though. Here's a couple more sandwiches. We can actually place the Valley View Spartan Head logo on it. Everyone see that? You can put that logo in a couple different places. Nice logo. Good sandwiches. Here's a couple more sandwiches. This one has avocado. Who likes avocado? Everybody likes avocado, right? The bottom one, though, is a good barbecue sandwich, but don't think about those baked beans. They're not in the budget. This is probably the sandwich you all will end up with. But no one here will tell you that, because we're not about transparency. We don't want you to see what we're actually going to end up with around here. Are you all confused yet? I haven't gotten any explanation of what we're trying to accomplish. I haven't set an agenda for any clear objectives that provide any timelines. I don't have any dates and gates of decision points. In fact, I don't really have any decisions for you to make at all. I plan to flash 75 good-looking pictures of sandwiches in front of you for the next 2 hours. I'm going to stand back as you debate and pontificate whatever you see fit. I will not provide you any level of financial information. Financial information can only be used to inform decisions, and that's not how we operate. At the end of the 2 hours, I will not collect any written responses. I will not provide any surveys for input that we're looking to gather, because in reality, we aren't tied to anything you say anyways, so why would we document that? In fact, the truth of the matter is, I have actually assembled this Valley View Building Committee as a sinkhole. Here's how a sinkhole works. At the end of the building, when the time it's been built, any negative feedback that comes from the community, I'll point to the sinkhole, and it will all just absorb that negative remarks. For example, when a community members ask why our new $65 million school campus looks like a nursing home situated between 2 prison cell blocks, I will just say that it was the building committee that thought it could pass for a farmhouse between 2 long barns, endearing to our farming community. As community members hear more and more about this building committee, they will have to assume that the building committee was consulted on building issues like the junior high decision that flushed over $5 million out of the budget and was never presented to the community that is actually funding the project. Or that the building committee provided feedback for the pitched roof that took another $1.7 million out of the budget and didn't add a single year of increased warranty. Those assumptions would be wrong though, but my objective would be met. I would escape any accountability for any of my poor decisions. Now, that's enough of that spoof nonsense. I hate to have to have done that, but it seems like the feedback I've provided over the last 2 years has fallen on deaf ears of the superintendent and the committee that's being led on this building committee. I want to make it unmistakably clear what it feels like participating on this committee. It feels like the committee could have been replaced by a PowerPoint accompanied by a survey. Other committee members have refused to attend because they feel the same sentiments. In fact, another committee member eloquently provided feedback just 2 weeks ago directly to the superintendent. I wonder if this feedback made it directly to the board or not. I don't want to imply that Mr. Richards has set out to manipulate. However, I do think he should reflect on how he communicates, or often doesn't communicate, and he learned from it. Transparency, even when unpopular, ages much better than duplicity, which seems to be unearthed at some point in the future. With that said, let me ask a few serious questions. In honor of the old board tradition not to respond to any questions during meetings, let's pretend that these questions are rhetorical, and I'll move right through them. Number 1, do you know what committee is actually providing any input that is being used for recommendations on the building project? Does the committee have any diverse perspectives or experiences, particularly with large budgets and long-term projects? Do any board members know exactly when Mr. Richards will recommend keeping or tearing down the existing schools? Do any of you know what the long-term plan is for the current high school that we're sitting in right now? Will it be maintained by the school district? How much will it cost to renovate and maintain this aging school? Will students actually be walking 1,000 feet to and from in 10-degree weather for shop classes? Does that make any sense to anyone? Does anyone know if the rumored incremental budget borrowing on top of the building fund or the bond levy will be needed? Do any of you fully understand any financial decisions that Mr. Richards serves up for a vote? Can any of you say that you fully understand the status of the building project thoroughly? That you know when key deadlines are approaching and clearly have the financial data to appropriately weigh in on them? Couldn't a properly constructed and appropriately utilized building committee help to provide perspective on these exact topics? Don't you think it would be wise to set up checkpoints for committees to provide perspective to the board directly? After all, these committees are advising on future board decisions, correct? Or there would be no point for them to meet and contemplate these things. You know, maybe a board member should actually sit in and attend these sessions. I know that 60% of this board is fresh, so I will stop drilling the innocent and leave you with 3 key takeaways. Number 1, I feel that the committee I participated in has been woefully inefficient and ineffective, almost by design. Number 2, I think the board should individually be able to answer each of these questions that I've laid out tonight and should be prepared to do that as soon as if Mr. Richards were leaving as of June 1st. Number 3, the district couldn't pass an operating or building levy for a decade due to lack of transparency and trust within the community. The new board members should reinstate transparency to the decision-making process and open and honest communication so we're not at odds with the community for the next decade. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Agenda item 3B, students of the quarter and employee of the quarter.
So hopefully this will be the last time that we have to do this kind of remotely, and we're gonna have a presentation ceremony with COVID having gone around. This has been the protocol that we've used for a time. The plan would be that for April, we will again have this Student of the Quarter recognition in person at the board meetings where we can actually invite all the kids and their parents to be recognized. I think by that time, with the information I've got from public health, we should be looking at a much better time period, hopefully in April, than even we are right now. So with no further ado, and I'm going to try to read their names, make sure I get it correctly. If I miss any elementary names, I'm sure Mrs. Sears will correct me. In kindergarten, Ellie Siebert and Wyatt Reveal. Making sure. In first grade, Sophia Shade and Trace Shade. In second grade, Isa Heater and Henry Holbrook. In third grade, Riley Mingle and Jason Sierra. In fourth grade, Greta Regal and Liam Mitchell. In fifth grade, Emery Sears and Leo Vaughn. In sixth grade, Delilah Ramirez and Grady Pickerel. In seventh grade, Jillian Shell and Luke Shade. In eighth grade, we have three: Rivers Lemke, Evan Philpott, and AJ Al Bukatra. In ninth grade, Delaney Reed and Peyton Flannery. In 10th grade, Eddie Owens and Thomas Wilhelm. 11th grade, Emma Shadowins and Riley McFarland Backus. And in 12th grade, Emma Speeson, Keegan Lynott, and our very own, sitting next to me, celebrity, Maddox Cradlewall. So, congratulations to all of our students, congratulations to Maddox. And our staff member of the quarter, she's finding, this person will be finding it out here tonight, will be Mrs. Jill Weaver. She is a teacher at our junior high. I'm sure if she's watching, she'll send me a text message to correct me. I'm pretty sure since she's been here, she's secured over about $2.5 million worth of grant money for our district. If you look at the newspaper, it's always Mrs. Weaver that's doing something that's getting the attention of NASA or something. We had a weather balloon last year that I think crash landed in West Virginia that the chase team had to end up. So our kids and our staff, we could probably list every name of kids and staff members that do a great job. But just wanted to give special recognition to these kids, and hopefully the plan would be in April that we get to have this in person. We get to hear all the great things that each of these kids and staff members do as well. So congratulations to these kids and staff.
Thanks, man. Roman numeral item 4, we need to take a look and approve our minutes. We've had 2 meetings since the last regular meeting. Well, we had the last regular meeting, and then we had the a special meeting on February 2nd. So I think everybody's had a chance to look at their board packets, the January 10th, 2022 minutes. And would someone like to make a motion that we approve the minutes as they are?
I have a correction.
Have a correction?
So under the section of election of president, the second motion, the second discussion of another motion made by Mr. DeGroat to nominate myself for board president. Ms. Iser seconded that motion. Just need to add that in.
Okay, we'll add that.
That's it.
Subject to that amendment, any other discussion?
I'll second, as corrected.
Would you please call the roll?
Who made the motion? I'm sorry.
Second, did you make a motion to amend?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, I officially made the motion.
Are you ready for roll call?
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. DeGroat?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes. The second item under this Roman numeral, the approval of the minutes for the special board meeting of February 2nd, 2022. Do we have a motion to approve them as they are?
So moved.
A second?
Second?
Any discussion? Or would you mind calling the roll?
Mr. DeGroat?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes. Roman numeral item 5A, discussion of the building project.
All right, and thank you for your time for this. I do have somebody from Concord, Mr. Riggs from the construction company, and Mr. Wilsinski from Fanning Howie, the architects, to be able to be here to answer some questions as well. And Let me say as well, I do appreciate Mr. Rayford's comments. I very much do. I will say it has been frustrating, and I share in that as well. We've tried some different things to keep changing it. I can say that those changes have yet to yield anything that has been positive for us. So I completely agree with him. And I think he said it well. The intent has not been to obfuscate. That's not been the intent at all. However, can some people feel that way? Yeah, and I'll own that. So I do own that, Mr. Reamer, and I do appreciate the involvement of everybody that's been involved. When we talk about the building project, I want to get really quickly, he served me up an easy one, so I'd like to take one of the easy ones off the plate. As far as what we do with the junior high and the elementary buildings that we have in the community. And we've tried to make sure this has been communicated pretty well. The hope would be for those buildings, those are not part of the long-term plan for Valley. Within our actual budget that we have from the state is the money designated to abate, remove the asbestos, and tear them down. I'm just going to use the intermediate building as one example because it's the one that the math I know the best. If we don't tear down the intermediate building, the 3-story intermediate, and I guess it used to be the old 6th grade wing, is that what somebody said? I'm looking for my people that know history. The 1-story part of the intermediate building. That's how it's called out.
Yes.
6th grade wing, thank you. That's what I've been told a number of times. I just want to make sure publicly I'm saying it correctly. With that, if we don't tear that down, if we were able to sell that building, the state will take back 60% of the funds that they were allocating to abate and demolish the building. The other 40% of the local funds that we would have, and in the case of the intermediate building, that's roughly $880,000. That's roughly $880,000. Could be put towards the building project. It would have to be used only for what was on our ballot issue of what we could use it for. We can't use it for salaries or anything else. It would have to be in accordance with the building project. Because it's also been in the newspaper for the building up in Germantown, we have had some interest. We are working with another party, and since it's been in the newspaper, it's absolutely fine. We are working with Germantown Christian because they are interested in the building. That is still very early on in the decision-making process. They're analyzing numbers, things of that nature. Because it would be in the district's best interest to not have to tear the building down. And I also think there's community interest. I've heard from a number of people that they don't want to tear those buildings down. They want to keep them up there. They are historic in nature. And for everybody that says, well, we look at Kinder Elementary in Miamisburg as an example of a building that's taken on new life and done well. I think for every example of that, and yet again, I'm not trying to play favorites to any one community over another, Kinder Elementary looks beautiful. I drive by it on a regular basis. But you can also have the old Gratis building, and you should drive by, and I'm not trying to put down any community or put up a community, but it's gone into a state of disrepair that's really an eyesore in the community. So we are actively trying to find partners. We were working with some people. We've had a number of people, Mr. DePue and myself, have given, I can't count how many tours up at the junior high in Farmersville. We have yet to find anybody that's really looking at that building, but if there are people that are interested, the district is willing to partner with them to look at if we can come up with some resolution. So that's something with the existing building, so I want to make sure I can say that really clearly, and the board, and then we'll move on to some other stuff. But if there's other questions about that, I'd be happy to try to answer that.
Along those lines, do we have a time frame when we have to make the decision whether we tear down or don't?
So no, there is no set timeline. In fact, we could actually wait to make a decision until the new building is up. That being said, from a district's perspective, it'd be in our best interest if there was a party that could tell us sooner rather than later. That would be advantageous because, for example, if we'll just use Germantown Christian since they've publicly expressed interest. And please, I don't want anybody going out there saying Germantown Christian is buying it. They've been given some numbers, they're looking at it, and their decision is their decision, and I respect whatever it is that they decide. If they said they wanted it, if they said by the end of this month they wanted it, that's great. We now know we have $880,000 that we can spend. But it's also a kicker. We want them to do their due process because if we just said you have until the end of the month and they said, well, we're not ready, and we can't make a decision that fast, then where does that put us? So I think we'd like to come up with some resolutions sooner rather than later. But do we have to have that? I would say it depends on what we focus on. If our goal is to not tear down the buildings, because we don't want to have to tear them down, then it's in our best interest, and fiscally it's in our best interest to not tear them down, to sell them to somebody else. Then it's in our best interest to give that a longer period of time so that we can hopefully avoid doing that. If there's someone that wants to come buy them now, I mean, that's great. We can enter into an agreement, and it's kind of like a house. We can say, we're signing the paperwork now and you won't take occupancy for 2.5 years. We can do whatever with that. We have a lot of latitude. But there is no set timeline unless we put one on there because we have reasons for wanting to put a timeline.
Yeah,
But there is no set timeline.
I guess my question is a little more along the lines of the state. Because
No.
if we take the state 60% and then just leave it and say, well, we'll do it someday, eventually
No.
they'll come to us and say that's.
No, so, Steve, you want to help maybe with that?
You basically need to spend the money within the time of the project agreement, and the project agreement, they'll want to know by the time you finish completion of the new construction, you want to move directly into the demolition, and if you choose not to, at that point in time, they're going to assume that they'll take their money back.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So before we move on, does anybody else have any questions about, because I've heard that same thing as well. We've tried to communicate that out, but maybe it hasn't gotten out as well as we needed to. So if there's anybody else that had questions about those buildings.
What would we say not tearing down Farmersville?
I want to say, it's not 880,000. I want to say it was somewhere around like 575. Does that sound about right? It's not thereabouts. I will say the comment that I've heard over and over, and I'm not, if some people may disagree, but the comment that I've heard over and over is, listen, if you tear the 3-story down in Farmersville, okay, but man, we want to be able to keep that gym. That's the comment that I've heard over and over, and whether that's the gym can go to a third party and they can rent it out. I don't think there's a set in stone that Valley View has to own the gym or any one entity, but I think there's a very strong sentiment that I've heard that they would like to keep that gym. I think the quote that I've heard, and it's pretty true, is it's our own version of Hoosiers, that gym. And if you've not been in the gym at the junior high, it is pretty neat. So, any other questions about?
Hey, Ben.
Yes.
I think it's $480,000.
Okay. Thank you. The mayor of Farmersville probably would know that, so thank you. Okay, moving on. With Mr. Raymer talking about the facilities, we've kind of got ourselves in a chicken and egg argument of where we are right now. So we have, I believe it was November, December, we have a budget for our building project that we can have. We had a number of people that expressed interest that we wanted to have a pitched roof. Well, there's no money in our existing budget for a pitched roof for that project. So that would have to mean, and this goes back to, I forget if it was November or December, I forget which meeting it was. November. That we would have to leverage our PI fund. Now, this is all the previous board, so I've got 2 board members on here that can attest to this. When we made the decision in last February, about a year ago, to go with the whole scope, to do a K-12, there was an understanding at the time that we were going to have to leverage the PI fund to do certain things like renovating the current high school, stuff like that. That was going to now exceed what our building project was doing. So there was a conversation about, well, if we want this, the Board of Education has to authorize it. And I thought we did a pretty decent presentation with Fannie Howie and Conquer, and we had different items and what we can do. My understanding is that there's also a desire by the board to kind of revisit that topic of pitched roofs. I think Mr. Raymer said it really well. I think it's $1.7 million. Where we are right now, and Mr. Lisinski and Mr. Bob, Brick, there we go. I just remember to call you Bob. Can tell you we are at a place where if we change course right now, it will probably delay us about a month. Now, is a month, in the grand scheme of it, is that impossible to overcome? No, it's not impossible. But there is a cost with delaying a month. But on the same token, it has gotten kind of back to me that the board would like to revisit this topic. So I wanted to have our experts here to be able to answer any questions that the board might have. When we talk about pitched roofs as well, one of the things that I think has also come up when Mr. Raymer's talking about the exterior of the building, it's really difficult to move forward with the exterior of a building when we don't know if the board is going to possibly look at having not pitched roofs. Then I think a lot of the conversation is focused on entryways into the building. Well, if you have pitched roofs all around it, there's certain entryways that would be visually aesthetic. If you don't have pitched roofs about it, then there's different options that are going to be appropriate. So we just need to, all I'm going to say is when we have this conversation, and I'm fine with revisiting it, but for the sake of the architects and construction people that are here, and I think they will tell you in no uncertain terms, if we can't make a decision today because the board needs more information, that's absolutely fine. But we can't keep, this is kind of our one time, we can make a decision and we can come back and revisit it because it's not truly past the zero barrier, although we can have a disagreement a little bit about, it might just be past that time and we can still work with it, but we can't make decisions and go back to them and then make decisions and go back to them. That's just not a feasible situation. So, yes, Mr. Griffin.
We voted on this.
Yes.
This decision had been made.
Yes.
We even included the new members on this, and if I remember right, it was 7-1.
Yes.
And we already voted, and it passed.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
my question is, why aren't we moving forward?
We have been.
Going back.
No, we have been moving forward with that.
But we're talking about, again, something that we already voted on.
It's been my understanding that there are some people on the board that would like to talk about it and revisit it. So that's been my understanding.
But did we all not discuss this and include the new members?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Here, let me tell you my thoughts on the matter. My thoughts on the matter are pretty straightforward. My concern is that the various features that get presented to the board, well, do you want this? Well, they get presented in a vacuum. They get presented somewhat piecemeal. And every one of the decisions we make is going to impact something else.
Yes.
And the way I would liken it, it's like we're trying to play a game of chess, but some number of the pieces are glued down and we can't move them, and we don't know which ones they are. Other ones are free, and we're trying to strategize based on what other people are going to do, and we need to understand, I think, better the interaction of all of this. This was before the wrestling room discussion.
Yes.
This was before the
Yes.
locker room discussion. This was
Yes.
before the gym size discussion. And
Yes.
again, I know a lot of those things, that's not state money that we're going to have to be able to do anything about, but there are a number of moving parts, and I think, and I don't know if this is for a committee level so that it can be reported back to us. I think that we would approach these decisions better if we had a clearer understanding of the actual interaction of all these moving parts. And I think with the pitched roof, my personal thought on that, and I was there, and again, do I want a pitched roof? I would love it.
Yes.
Do we have the money for it? I don't think we do. And we've got lots of other decisions we're gonna have to make along the way. And I'm almost inclined to draw back those couple $1 million expenditures that aren't necessary so that we can address the things that we have to that are gonna become necessary when we do. And there was a comment made, and I thought about it that night, back in November. And I can't recall exactly who it was that made it, and asked the question, how do pitched roofs, how do those benefit the academics? And a lot of discussion was aesthetic. And so, yeah, I mean, I personally would not be opposed to revisiting that issue.
So, in truly, whatever the board decides is the board's decision. What I will say though at the beginning, and if the board needs more information, we do have two of our experts here tonight to be able to answer those questions. If we need to get them to get us more information, what I'd like is to be able to, if we do need more time, is for us to say, what is it that we do need from them, so that we can do that, and if we can come back, and I hate doing this to all of us, but if we even needed it to have a special board meeting, I mean, as soon as humanly possible, as soon as they can get any information, but while we have them here, I think it might be beneficial, just so everybody also understands when we talk about pitch roofs, kind of to your point, Mr. Rudd, I think everybody would say, and even the OFCC says, pitched roofs are better than a low slope roof. Even the OFCC would say that. OFCC kind of has what they have, good, better, best. And they will not build anything that they don't believe is good. And I do think, because I've had someone yell at me for 2.5 years, that low slope roof is not the same as no slope. And I've had him beat that into my brain for 2.5 years. So low slope roof is what the state considers to be good. Pitched roof is what they consider to be best. So there is no, even the OFCC would agree that a pitched roof is better than a low slope. There's really no debate about that. Even the OFCC agrees. But for the people that are new to this conversation, the state would say, we will co-fund on what is good. If you want best, you've got to pay for the difference. That difference is all on you.
Two things.
Yes.
What Mr. Rudd said, there's nothing free. Correct. So everybody knows this is costing us a lot of money. Two, there's two main things, components to this school and the longevity of it. It's the foundation and the roof. Am I correct on that?
That's two of several, but yeah, two.
But those are two of the main components, the longevity of the structure.
True.
Okay. And we had already discussed it. I think we should continue to move forward and stop going back. And I don't feel it's
Might I just ask one clarifying question, Mr. Drew? How much of this building will have a slope roof? Not low slope, but
all the ones
a pitched roof. How much will
all
have
the
a
ones
pitched?
that are engineering possible, like everything except for the gyms and the, like cafeteria.
60%?
Classroom wings in front entries.
I think we can say all academic spaces.
60%? Yeah, that's what I assume. So 60% of these will cost us 1.7. You'll still have 40% of this building without a pitched roof.
And the one you just said earlier that you had no numbers and now you got 1.7. So how do you got one number and then not?
I'm the one that had the number. I said 1.7. If you follow along with what I read, I'll
No,
give you a document. so you
I
know.
do. I
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah, no, that's not what I said. I didn't say I didn't have all the numbers. The problem is exactly what Mr. Rudd stated, is that all this stuff is not put together as a holistic project, and you, my sir, think you can make decisions on one-offs. That's not the way it works with a long-term building project. I understand you got a couple of buildings. That's not the way it works. Anytime you want to debate this, we'll have a nice chat, my friend.
Love it.
Yeah, I bet you wouldn't.
So, yeah, the committee's recommendation was to go with the low slope, is that correct?
So I would say this, there was really no consensus with that. You've got people that had some different opinions on that. And we had a number of meetings about that, and I don't think there was really ever any consensus. You had some people that very much believe that it's mission critical. You had some people that believe, hey, for the money, we'd rather do some other things. So I cannot say that there was ever a consensus about that. I think you could find a number of different opinions on that topic.
What could we do? Because we're gonna have other decisions to make.
Yes.
What could we do to equip the board to have a clear picture of the inner working parts, the monetary components, the time components, when decisions have to be made, what can be done, what can be undone, what's already completely, the ship has sailed and there's no value in even wasting mental energy on it? How can the board be better equipped to address
I think
those
one of the
issues?
easiest ways to do that is because we have a board that is elected by a community. And what I will say, and I'm not trying to put, we had the people that did show up at meetings and community members, and staff members, I appreciate all their time. But you get that many opinions and trying to find some consensus, it's just difficult, and I'm not putting anybody down. My recommendation with the time frame that we're talking about, Mr. Rudd, is that we get 2 board members, and we work to catch them up to speed on all of those things. Board members of your guys' choosing, that would be a part of that can listen to all of that, because if we follow the democratic process of this, board members are chosen by the community, so therefore you are the voice of the community. I would say we have 2 board members that look at all of those things and then we make the decisions. When I look at the fastest way for us to do things without waylaying the project, I would just, my natural inclination is to go towards the democratic process and the democratically elected people, and that is the 5 of you. But yet again, trying to get all 5 of you in for one meeting might prove difficult, so my thought would be to get 2 of you that we could spend some time with. And that would be kind of crash course 101 for whoever the 2 people are that are lucky or fortunate or suckers enough to be part of the process. But I think having 2 people that are chosen that are democratically elected by their community would make the most sense to me, Mr. Rudd. But that's just my thought.
Quick question, this is not a global question, this is
No.
a real specific question.
Yeah.
There was mention that there would be a cost of revisiting that. Obviously, there's a time delay.
Yes.
Right? Time is money, so that
Yes.
means there's an economic delay.
Yes.
What are we looking at in terms of the economic cost of just revisiting that decision?
And we had a core meeting today, and we actually had the OFCC representative there, as well as construction manager and architect. And this is the first we heard that there would even be a discussion of this. We at this time do not know. So for perspective, where we are, we're in the second phase of design. The first phase is schematic design, that's what you approved previously in the fall. This is design development, and in design development, the vast majority of details and decisions are wrapped up. We are now 2 weeks away from the completion of that. Our scheduled design development completion date is February 28th. We are currently proceeding per the previous direction with the sloped roof and the metal roof over all the academic areas as well as the front facade. So that's what the documents currently have. So when that question was brought up, the answer really was, I don't honestly know, because there's a lot of parts that we have to talk to. Structural engineer, mechanical engineer, architects will all have to do some changing. The sooner, the less impact. We know right now there is an impact on kind of undoing and then redoing if we have to change, because we'll have to actually modify a lot of the work that's been completed. If we go farther and farther along, the problem would only exacerbate and would take more time and cost more. But I honestly do not have an answer for the cost at this point in time.
Do you know what kind of time frame you might be able to get that?
We were thinking that it's probably going to be around a month.
From a construction standpoint, that means we have an early site package that's coming out at the end of March. So we were talking about getting the site package, we're gonna still start that at the same time. So we're gonna get the clock rolling on the project, no matter what decision is made. So that starts the clock rolling. Whatever delays comes about because of the decision to redo the design a little bit, that just gets tacked on to the end of the job. So we're not delaying the start of the project without going to the end of the project, which will involve extra staffing and general conditions from our perspective, just to add those extra months to the end of the project. But that's where we are at this point. Right now, the schedule is May of '24 to finish. So we have a couple months at the end to look at if we need to move it back.
Okay. So it seems to me that and again, any decision we make, the board, it seems to me that we can't make any decision without knowing what it's gonna cost, both in opportunity and money and time. And we need to get that information before we decide whether this is even worth having this conversation. But then time is money, so the longer we make to have that conversation.
The trigger rate, you're right.
Yeah, and so we got this kind of $1.7 million issue hanging out here that we're gonna need to visit. And so I don't know if we have a solution today.
So then, and maybe the thing today is the process moving forward. And I think that's where you were going, Mr. Rudd, is where do we go moving forward? That's just my 2 cents about how we do that moving forward and trying to be expeditious. Is we use 2 members of the Board of Education because it's a democratically elected process, at least for that. I don't know what the board thinks. I'm open to any other idea that you might have. You would ask for what my thought was. That's my quick blush thing. And part of that is because we're needing to have a process that can move quickly. And that would be a way to move faster.
I don't think that's a terrible idea, to have two people liaise.
Yeah.
I'd make a motion that we select 2 people to be liaisons to help address whether or not this is even worth having a conversation.
Yeah. Okay.
discussion? My thoughts on the discussion point is that it doesn't bind the board, all it does is give us another option.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of options, and so, any other discussion? Laura, would you call the roll?
Who are the?
Oh, this is just a motion to decide that we're going to pick two people, and then we'll just
Got
have
it.
to see who wants to volunteer.
Okay. Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mr. DeGrove?
No.
Mrs. Iser? No. Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Any volunteers?
I'd be willing, but if somebody else wants, it's fine too.
So I'd also like to bring out, and I know this is tricky because of the five of you, we're gonna need some time to be able to do that, and I know a lot of you have some pretty busy schedules, but it'd be better if we could move sooner rather than later on this for reasons that Mr. Wilsinski has said. So I just want to be sensitive, and I don't care which of the five of you it is, it's fine with me, but I think we also need to know we have to get moving, and I know that some of you have some schedules that are just tricky because of what you guys do for a living. If people don't know, they don't make their money by being on the Board of Education. That's not where you guys make the bulk of your income.
Really?
I'm pretty positive of that. If you do, we need to talk, Mr. Rudd.
You know, I honestly, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, that even if you oppose the idea of even having this two people liaisons, it might not be a bad idea if someone who didn't think it's a good idea wanted to participate, just so that they
Yeah.
inform people on both sides of that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'll do it if no one else wants to. And then I move that it be me and Bob. Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Laura, would you call the roll?
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. DeGrove?
No.
Mrs. Iser? No. Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
So we'll try to get with the two of you before maybe we leave tonight to look about the schedule.
Perfect.
If that's okay.
Yep, Roman numeral 6A, recommend the board approve the financial statements for the month ending January 21st, 2021, attachment to your board report.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I have just a couple of quick comments.
Yes, ma'am.
On the rolling report is what I call it. It's with the two blue bars that go across the page. January was an interesting month from a state funding perspective because kind of the first phase-in of the new funding model was funded our way, and so they did a catch-up for the first 6 months. And so you can see the number there. We had estimated about $740,000 in revenue, and we actually got $1.5 million. But again, that's a catch-up from the rest of the year. I am purposely not bringing you any specific details yet because they're still phasing in components of the funding model. And I don't want to bring that to you until it's a little more complete, which they're telling us is going to be in March. So hopefully soon we'll have that. The other thing to point out was our income tax. We've received another installment of our income tax, and that was about $180,000 ahead of what my projection was. And so income tax is very, very strong, which I'm really happy to see. So overall, we're running about $1.3 million ahead in terms of revenue and about $380,000 under what our projected expenses are. So finances are looking really good at this point through January.
We have a motion to approve and a second. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. DeGrove?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser? Yes. Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes. Item 6B, recommend the board approve the following then and now certification, not required to meet this obligation in the Treasury or in the process of collection regarding ESC payment. Laura, would you like to explain to everybody what that is?
I'm happy to do that, and I did send you an email this afternoon, but just to kind of go over, this is a compliance thing to keep us compliant with audit. So we have processes and internal controls that we have in place in the office in terms of purchasing. So you have to have a purchase order before any services or supplies can be committed to the district. Sometimes that just doesn't happen. Sometimes it's an emergency type of situation. If Mr. Depew has something break on the weekend, he obviously has to have it fixed, you know, and we're not, if the heat goes out or if, you know, you name it, whatever that might look like. We have to get someone in and get that going so that we can start school on Monday, and the paperwork's not in place for that. This particular instance was some services that we had received from the Educational Service Center. They're usually pretty good about all their billing, but this was one that got missed, and there was just not a purchase order in place for that. I can authorize anything up to $3,000, but if it's over that, I have to come to the board for approval, and again, this is to keep us compliant with audit.
What were the services?
It was special education services, but I don't know exactly what service, but it was for special education.
I make a motion that we approve the then and now certification.
A second.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. DeGroat?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Roman numeral 7, new business, subsection A, discussion of substitute pay.
So, one, I want to be able to start off with, I'm pretty positive this is the first day this year where we actually had coverage for every staff member in the district. I'm pretty positive this is day number 1 for that. And we're in February. I'd also like to be able to thank Mr. Kazarek. He works tirelessly on that. I think he meets, I see him in my office in the district office all the time. I think he interviews like 3 to 4 people for substitute teaching every week. And so he's done a fantastic job of trying to add that. That being said, when we talk about our substitute pay, one of the things we did is we increased to $125 each time for long-term subs, for people that are in our buildings every single day. And actually, I think this is the first day, it was a smart investment by the board, because I think this is the first day that all of those, what we call building subs, not all of them were actually in a classroom. This is the first day for this whole year that we've had that happen, which is...
We're actually, to add on that, able to do our improvement plan solidly without having to pull another teacher and have it covered, not spare a classroom and their instructions were on there,
So this is the first day that a teacher hasn't had to give up their planning period to cover a class for the whole school year. But that being said, like everything else, we're in a keeping up with the Joneses type mentality a little bit. And there's different people that are raising their sub pays. Our sub pay is still $100 a time for our traditional subs. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Kazarek because he's been doing a lot of work with that. I know he put
I sent
in your
some
board back
documents
there.
to you guys in my board report in reference to it. I tried to do some of those, sent one in on the pay for Warren County, Butler County and Warren County pay. What we find out with our substitutes, they don't travel far to subs don't travel far. They're local. They're going to be in Germantown, Miamisburg, Carlisle, New Lebanon, Gratis, Camden area. I do have a graduate that's coming from Oxford, and she's a student up there. She wants to make some money. We got her signed up. She's good to go. She came in today, as a matter of fact. It's up today. The first chart I'll reference is the one on the pay. And I dealt that with just the ones around here. I did throw Bellbrook in there. I'm not sure why I threw Bellbrook in there. I don't like Bellbrook. I don't know why I put them in there, but they're high. They're $150. That's too much. I don't agree with that. That's too much. Most of them have gone up since the last time I looked at that. There were 1, 2, 3 schools that had no adjustments. We're at $100 a day, not a building sub. Our regular sub daily rate's $100 a day. We decided to stay with that and do the building sub to $125. You asked me, does that work? Is that working for us? It's hard to put a number on that. If you go to the chart, it's got the fill rate. Fill rate is the percent that we're actually being able to fill. The positions we have open, that's the percent we're fill. You look at those numbers, you're probably going, that's horrible. It's not great. Ask me the teachers here. It's not been great. But if you look at February, we're in the mid to high 70s there. I know we're just starting that month. And I put some comparison numbers there from 2020, 2019, 2020. It was 85%. It was pre-COVID. So we're climbing up there. But what the building subs do for our buildings, they give flexibility for our principals and administrators who are trying to fill those positions on the spot. They really do that. We're up to 7. We just added a 7th one for special ed. to help out with our inclusion planning days, which worked out because we're actually able to offer one for our resource room teachers and our co-taught classrooms. So they are in a benefit there with the building subs. And when we do have one, how that process works, and I interview them and talk to them, and I think this person might work out to be a building sub, I'll email the principal and say, hey, keep your eye on this person, give me a reference of whether you think it is, and then I talk with Mr. Richards, we make a decision, we go ahead and offer that to that person, it works out that way. So we have some of those going on there. So I do think the building sub is working. If you were to ask me what would be my recommendation for a pay, which I'm sure which was the need of the stuff we want to know, I kind of like, in the school I talked about it, that I called, Rebel Shawnee kind of does an interesting thing, I thought. Because what I found out is, and Mr. Richards even asked me, Todd, I see you here all the time interviewing people. How come it's not getting better? I'm like, man, I talk to them. I don't know if I'm scaring them away. Sometimes they don't get on the ASOP. They don't get on there. So what Pearl Shawnee does, they do a $100 bonus a month for any sub that puts at least 10 days in. So it's kind of like, you know, I thought that was kind of, okay, we're going to pay you $100, but if you come here 10 days, we'll give you a bonus. Now, whatever you want that bonus to be is fine, they do 100. And I thought that was kind of a different way to do it. You could tier it too and say, you know, we're going to pay you $100 a day. If you work X number of days in the district, we'll pay you $110 a day. I think you got to add that in there because it just draws them in. And it draws them in, gives them an incentive to maybe work more, you know, which is what we want. We want them to come in more, especially if they're good. If they're not good, well, then that comes back on me too, and I got to get rid of them. But that's fine. We have to do that.
Well, I guess I have a couple questions for you. One, there is a cost to hire a sub, but there's also a cost to not having a sub. Right? There's an economic cost. We got people missing their planning periods. There's a morale cost. You know, there's a decline in the ability to serve the needs of the students cost because we want our teachers to have planning periods.
Yeah.
So there's this non-economic cost.
Yeah.
And there's some economic costs.
Yes.
Right? Because you got people spending time and attention on things that aren't optimizing what they're here to do. I guess my question is for you is what level of authority would you like? And I would be more comfortable instead of having to revisit this. I'd be more comfortable having a ceiling and just saying, hey, do the best you can within this. You know, and I'm not concerned about keeping up with the Joneses. So don't worry about the Joneses. Yeah. If we take every sub from Dixie, I don't care. Right? And it's not because I'm a mean person. It's because we're responsible to make sure that the kids here get what they need. And so, I would be, if you could give us a range of what you would like to do in terms of bonuses, in terms of setting daily rates, maybe some combination of the two, I would much prefer address this as an empowering you to do it so that we're not revisiting.
So I have an idea towards that end. You talked about that there is an economic savings, Mr. Rudd. So every time we have a teacher cover a class, it's $35 a period. You do that for up to 6 periods, I think it's 210. I think I just did it in my calculator. So I think we want to stay, we're not trying to spend more money. That's something we all want to do, but anything that we do, very bluntly, under 210 is by default better for us.
Yeah.
So I think that having a system, now that being said, if we just said we're going to make everybody 125, then very bluntly we're not getting building subs. No one's going to be a building sub if it's the same rate as that.
Sure.
But I think as my 2 cents to that question, and I think it's a fair point, is putting a system in place that would still represent a cost savings to the district, as your point, and while still with the goal of providing the teachers with the contractual time that they're obligated to have. I don't think we want to go over that. I won't speak for the teachers union, but if we're going to pay substitutes more than we're paying the teachers to cover their classes, I think that would be a little frustrating. But I think as long as we are representing a cost savings to the district, as long as we're going within reason. I hear Mr. Kazarick saying 150 for a sub. That's a little bit high, but maybe we look at that tiered system and maybe we get empowered to do that.
I like the bonus, if you work over 10 days, then.
I can definitely work on some numbers and piece something together. I can't do that top of my head here, but I can probably put something together and work with Mr. Richards on that. And
So, Mr. Rudd, you were asking for kind of some sort of ceiling.
So,
Um,
I'm gonna be the wet blanket on that.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Oh, I forgot. Laura's always
We
gonna be
will have an audit issue with that and a compliance issue, so, while I understand what you're saying about the ceiling, it makes sense, we have to have a consistent, some sort of consistent mechanism that we're paying people by.
Okay.
And so, you know, as long as the board approves whatever, if, in the bonuses and stuff, that's all okay, we can do that, but we can't arbitrarily choose to pay somebody $130
Sure.
this day and then
Yeah.
$150 this day.
Right, no,
I didn't
So-
take it as that.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
obviously
Okay.
it'd be applied to everybody.
Got it.
Just if he needs, if the scale needs to move up,
Perfect.
then
Okay.
I just not have to come to us, because these
Right.
are decisions you're making in real time.
The other, besides the pay that has really helped out is the board, if you remember, passed a resolution on the change of the requirements for us, last, was October, we did that, where we changed that a little bit, and that's worked out pretty good. We've added, 29 additional subs that have come in. 9 of them here recently have been under the new resolutions, and a couple of them are actually building subs right now. So that's really helped in itself pull in people to do that. And we've looked at our staff, and we've identified some staff to help out. For example, in our MH rooms, we're able to get, because of the resolution, some of our aides, we can actually get them certified as a certified substitute as well. So we've done that a little bit to help out. In those rooms, it's consistency matters. Consistency is huge. So if we can not disrupt that room by bringing anybody in there and just let that room continue to go and still be legally correct with what we have, because we have one of our aides becoming the sub, it works out great, and that's helped out too. So we can work on that, and I can work with Mr. Richards on that, but I really think that we're moving 3 things. One, the resolutions that we've changed were good and help building subs, good and help. And I really think I'm watching the news, and Smith, you probably know better than I do. I think COVID, they're saying the COVID's kind of going down a little bit. And all that together is going to make it a better situation for our teachers, and they don't have to be jumping into classrooms, and better for our kids. It's learning. It's long.
So, Mr. Rudd, I think what I hear you saying is you're empowering us to come back, as long as we can propose something that's a cost savings to the district, that we're not going to be spending more money on it. That would be kind of our ceiling. It's not to go above, I think if we went above 210, we're going to have some other issues, but something within reason, that if we come back and take that's our ceiling, we can do better, that's great. And then we come back in March and make a presentation about what we want to do, so that way the board can approve it, so that helps with the auditing purposes. Does that sound about right, or no?
I obviously I'm aware, I don't want to monopolize the discussion, because Stephanie brought this issue up.
Yeah.
So if Stephanie's satisfied with that, that's something good.
Well, this was brought to me by somebody out in the community who reached out to me, who has been a sub here for many, many years. And they said they just didn't feel appreciated, they felt that they got paid more, that they would like me to draw on more subs, and subs would be more interested in doing what it is. So I told them I would bring that.
So I don't know if you can take any official action.
Nope.
but I just-
I think we've got the
They're
approach
proven.
where to go.
Yeah, the schools are, the ones I, got 50/50 did increase, and even your list had, they increased, on some of theirs, so. I think just within the financial means, I think.
Thank you, sir, appreciate it. Room number 7B, discussion of student board members, this is Saturday.
I've been told by Mr. McKee that Maddox is in fact probably going to graduate unless he does something to screw that up here at the very end, but
Can the board address that?
you do have to sign off on it and approve the list of graduates, but I'm pretty positive he's actually going to graduate. In fact, I'm pretty positive from hearing stories about Maddox from years before. I think it was pretty much a set in stone that in kindergarten he was going to graduate on time. So no, this was our first foray, and Sophia's can't be here as well because there's play practice for the next 2 weeks. She's involved in that, so she's active with there. And I will tell you, of all the times for us to have 2 student board members to come and do this right when we start COVID has been interesting to say the least. But I think Maddox and Sophia were our guinea pigs, and I think they have been a valuable voice. But I think it might be helpful to use Maddox and Sophia as well to kind of maybe help us on where to go next, on how to keep using these positions to be of more use to us, and also to talk about maybe the selection process, because we will need to get new students in place. And he is going to graduate, and so is Sophia, by the way. If Sophia's listening later on, Sophia's going to graduate too. That's a mortal lot. So I didn't know if maybe, Maddox, we might be able to turn it over to you, since you were one of our first 2 ever student board members that we can take a look at.
Well, I mean, I kind of found out about it because there was an announcement made back 2 years ago when it was first announced. And then there was a teacher had kind of like recommended, she kind of like nudged me into doing it. So I think maybe I do the announcements every morning, I can definitely put in the work for that. But I also think maybe something that we could do is ask teachers for recommendation, like recommending students, so that we kind of like can get like a more narrowed down list of students and then kind of go from there. Because teachers usually kind of know who's actually going to put in the work, who's going to show up, who's going to do it, not just to look good, but to like actually put the work in. So I think that could be a good place to start. But I would be more than happy to assist in any way. If me and Sophia need to like sit down, train a little bit or whatever.
I would also think, this is just my 2 cents, it might actually be really nice, because what's going to stink here in a few months is we're going to lose both of our student board members. It might be nice moving forward if we had 1 current junior and 1 current sophomore. And so that way we always had one of them that has some experience and the other one kind of can come along. Maddox and Sophia were both great. We're just like, hey, this is wonderful. They were both younger. We got to take advantage of them for 2 years, and that's great. That might be something, I just thought it might be helpful for us as a board, prior to all of a sudden getting to May and we're wishing him congratulations on graduation, and all of a sudden we go, oh shoot, now we got to pick new students. So I don't know if the board has any thoughts on that, or if you want me to work with Maddox and Sophia to kind of come up with the system.
That was actually one of the things I had written down, is to try to get 1 sophomore and 1 junior, so we get just 1 new person each year.
I agree.
I did also want to make sure that however we advertise it, that the CTC students get involved.
You have thoughts? So Ben, I guess
Yep.
you'll let us know what
Yep.
the 3 of you come up
Yep,
with?
we will take care of that.
Awesome, thank you. Roman numeral 7C, selection of OSBA Student Achievement Liaison.
So Mrs. Smith brought this one to me, so I think this is a result of your new board member OSBA training, I believe. So this is something that OSBA has been doing for years. I can tell you, in talking to OSBA, that Valley View is not the only district that has never taken advantage of this. In fact, it's pretty common. But typically at the January organizational meeting, just like we have a legislative liaison on the board, OSBA asks for a student achievement liaison, a board member to be student achievement. This is a person that finds out more information. They get a newsletter about academically what's going on around the state from a student achievement standpoint to get ideas on. And the focus point is then that board member, just like we have a board member that should be sharing legislative updates with the board, the concept of it is that we have a board member that is sharing student achievement with the board, so that way we always keep student achievement at the forefront of what we're doing, which as a board is kind of what we're supposed to do. So, so if the board would like, it is not too late. My understanding is this is about the same amount of time as the legislative liaison. It can be a lot of time if you want to get really involved in it. If you just want to kind of do a few things, it can be a little bit. But we would, I think, first is, would the board be interested in having this position? Then we have to select somebody.
It seems to me the first question before we decide whether the board's interested in having the position would be, is anybody interested in serving in the position?
Okay. Yeah.
I am.
All right, so the question then becomes, do we want to appoint someone to this? I make a motion that we appoint Stephanie to that position.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? My 2 cents is I think she'd do a good job. Laura, would you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. DeGroat?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Roman numeral 7D, recommend the board approve the Valley View baseball team training trip to the Jackie Robinson Training Complex in Vero Beach, Florida, March 27 to March 31st, 2022.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
They don't need extra chaperones. I've already checked on behalf of all of you. They're fine on chaperones.
Okay. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. DeGroat?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes. Roman numeral 7E, first reading of board policies and guidelines. We have enumerated in your agenda, specific policies and specific guidelines. Ben, you want to take the lead on discussing these?
Yeah, so we've had Mr. Rudd and Mr. Skidmore got to be part of it. It is action-packed when we get to talk about policies.
Two hours at 7:30 in the morning.
Yes, so thank them for their time. But one of the reasons that we've gone with this system is, and I think Mr. Skidmore and Mr. Rudd can articulate this. I think Mrs. Iser, you've been on this committee in the past. A lot of these policies, it's kind of pro forma. It's to be in compliance with changes in the law. There's not a lot of decision-making on it. It's just to try to put us in compliance. We work with a group called Neola to try to advise us with that, which is basically a group of attorneys that look through different case laws, and they try to make sure we put the district in a position where we are legally defensible with different court cases that have come up. So a lot of these things that are on here are really kind of just boilerplate conversations. But one of the reasons we put 2 board members on there is that if any other board member had any questions about it, instead of me just passing along to you, you can actually hear from the board members. And I do think it's exceptionally important to have board members on that, because these are the board's policies. They are not the superintendent's policies. They are board policies. So most of the things on here, in my opinion, were pretty expected and pretty standard. Most of the things on here are actually things that we're already doing, and just to put us in compliance with the law.
Ben,
Yes.
I think my recollection is correct, but it's not always. Were there any substantive deviations from the old recommendations on any of these?
No.
I guess my next question to the board is, does anybody want to read them all, or do you want to defer to the superintendent committee with 2 board members on it to approve Neola's proposals?
And this is just a first reading. There would be a second reading, of course.
Ben, do the board members have access to these proposed policies online if they want access?
Yes.
I make a motion that the board agree to read these at their own leisure and on their own time, rather than take time during the meeting to do it.
We do. Sorry.
Yeah.
We don't actually need a motion for a first reading.
Oh.
The first reading is just, there's no action actually on that, I'm sorry. We
So
probably-
is it just a motion to waive the first reading, or is it in reading at all?
There's no action needed on the first read.
Sure.
It's just basically they're on the agenda so that we can discuss them like this, just like we have. And if anybody has any questions, they can ask those tonight. The motion then next month will be the motion to actually approve those, and that one's called the second reading. So sorry. I
So
didn't
then,
talk about that
so then they're
process.
deemed read then? at
They
this
are
point?
deemed read, yes.
Oh, I
Because at this time, you could add something to it if you want, correct?
Yes.
All right, then, let's move on to agenda item 8, executive session. And Laura, you'll tell me how we've done this in the past. When we have 2 items, do we just move to go into executive session for these 2 things, and then
Yes.
we'll divvy our time?
That's correct, yes.
This is, I make a motion that we go into executive session to discuss employment and compensation of a public employee, and to consider the investigation of charges or complaints against one or more regulated individuals.
So moved.
I'll second it. Any discussion?
Mr. DeGroat?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Hey, Tim,
Yes.
custodial